Alrighty guys, welcome back to another episode of Airtime with Jordan. I'm your host Jordan Fasso, and today we are continuing on again with our season previews for all the teams. Going with Carlton today, and just an update on the order I'm going to do these in. I'm going to try and get them done for the teams that are playing in round 0, thanks to the AFL, but we'll change up the order, and next time I'll do one of the teams that's playing in round 0, perhaps the Sydney Swans or something like that. So yeah, bear with me and we'll get those ones out this week, and then hopefully the remaining teams in the following week before they officially start their seasons. And yeah, just a little recap on how we're going to do this if you haven't tuned into the Adelaide or Brisbane one. Basically just going to review last year for each team, give their record, whether they underperformed, sort of just, general overview of how they went. Do some ins and outs of the list, and who they got in the offseason and who they let go. The expectations I have for them this year, what to look out for each team. Then we're going to go through some of the top players, or just players in general that I'm sort of expecting to keep an eye on and potentially make a leap. And then we'll close it out with just a bit of a ladder projection and general power ranking for those teams as well. So yeah, let's get underway. And Blues fans, let's dissect you guys a little bit, I think, for to start out here. So their year last year, they ended up 13-10. They finished 8th on the ladder. And, started out with pretty promising. The first sort of half of the year was really promising, and then the back half of the year, they really struggled quite a bit. They only had 2 wins from their last 9 games. That's including the final against Brisbane, so I've put that in there. And, that's concerning enough, but the 2 wins as well were only against West Coast and North Melbourne, and everyone sort of knows the state of those 2 teams last year. So it's pretty demoralising sort of stat when you consider those 2 wins as well. So yeah, they very much just crawled to the finish line in the end, and pretty disappointing given the hype around the team at the start of the season. But at the end of the day, they just weren't good enough, and Health had a fair amount to play, like a fair role to play in that regard. But they were still healthy enough to make a bit of noise come late in the season and not go 2 of 9 in their last 9 games, I think. So I'm obviously starting out on a bit of a sour note for the Blues fans out there. They still had 4 guys make the All-Australian squad in the end, and only Wiedering and Cripps, of course, made it. But, to have 4 guys actually make the squad is still a good sort of, I don't know, a good result for the Blues. I think there was only a couple of teams that had 5 players make the actual squad as well. So they were up there in terms of their top-end talent, but that's their issue. They ended up being pretty top-heavy, and when some of those quality players have great seasons, but they're often injured, or the Blues in particular, I feel like they're a bit sandbagged by their bottom 5 or so players each week, despite how good that's the top echelon of players that the Blues are. And I think I'm gonna I won't go on too much about their year last year, because we want to get stuck into some of the looking forward rather than looking back part. But I think Sam Walsh as well, really had a weird year for me. I've been a fan of his for a long time, and don't get me wrong, he still averaged 28.4 touches, which isn't nothing, but I don't know about the rest of you guys, but I just did not feel him impact the game as much, and you sort of left watching Blues games and sort of wanted a bit more from him. I think it was a lot of the times in the middle it was Cripps or nothing, despite Walsh getting plenty of the ball. And I'm not sure if that's anecdotal, just me feeling that, but he was very much down in his efficiency as well, so that probably played a role. In the 3 previous years, he hovered around 74% disposal efficiency, and then last year it went down to 76%. So that's a fair drop-off, 66% last year was indeed below average for a midfielder, based on the competition benchmark last year, thanks to the AFL stat site. But yeah, I think that it's probably not all on Walsh in that regard, in terms of obviously I'm not blaming him for Carlton being pretty disappointing last year, but the fact that the Blues midfield group was top 5 in all clearance stats last year, yet they only ranked 7th. They ranked only 7th last in inside 50s, which sort of tells me that they were either butchering the ball, which is sort of what I'm alluding to with the Sam Walsh thing, where he's down about 8% on his disposal efficiency last year. yeah, they're either butchering the ball or the opposition is just too easily shutting them down, and they're not getting that spread out of the middle, which, like Walsh in theory is meant to provide. And whether he was a little bit hampered by injury, which I think he was in the back half of the year for sure, but regardless, he played a role in his lack of polish, I guess, last year really I think might have cost them a little bit in the midfield, especially with the year that Cripps had. But yeah, I think like Cripps does a great job of getting the ball, and then it's sort of Sam Walsh. It's on Sam Walsh to spread and provide that breakaway from the pack. So I think he just didn't do that quite at the same level he's done it in years past. Combined with the lack of it, like the drop in efficiency, sort of makes me think that he was possibly a reason that they didn't quite live up to expectations last year. We know how good he is. I don't want to make this a pile on Sam Walsh because I really, really like him as a player, and I think he's very underrated. And, it was only 2023, that final series when he won Best Finals Player. So, look, he has a big role to play in that regard, and I'm looking at him for a bounce-back year this year, which, could go a long way for them with the injuries piling up. He's one that's going to be absolutely on the front of my mind and in trying to pull the Blues up from, they've started the season not great with the amount of injuries that are piling up for them, and he's obviously included in that, but it sounds like he's going to be back relatively early, so hopefully he can get the Blues back on track and get his career back to what we saw prior to last year, I guess. So that's enough probably on last year and just sort of my general thoughts on it. I think we'll move on to the ins and outs for the Blues over the off-season, and I've got a little bit to say about this one because I really wasn't that big of a fan of the Blues off-season. They brought in Jagger Smith, they brought in Nick Haynes, they brought in the Camporelli twins through the draft, Harry Charlson, Matt Duffy and Harry O'Farrell are the ins. And just quickly on the ins, Jagger Smith unfortunately went down with an ACL and he's in not even the real practice game, one of the practice games, unfortunately. And a lot was hinging on his development. They needed it to happen relatively quickly for their midfield depth and quality, I thought, and would have helped them this year, no doubt, and would have got a regular game, I'd imagine. But I want to clarify, it's not Jagger's fault. Before I say this, but the fact that they gave up 2 first-round picks of him was something I was not a massive fan of at the time, given it was such a deep draft. I think the Blues, especially with where they were at, they didn't necessarily need to do that. They could have just taken the 2 first-round picks in a deep draft and rolled the dice on those 2, being just as good as the third pick overall in the end. And it just seems like a bit of and obviously the injury now just makes it even seem like a big disaster for a team that is trying to win right now. They think they're in the window, and when you're trading out 2 first round picks for just one talent, and he goes down for 12 months, it's definitely not looking great, that move in the end for the Blues. And hopefully he can make a speedy recovery and get some of the preseason in next year, and hopefully be back for round 1 in 2026. But I think so obviously all of it is based on the injury to him, but it wasn't a great move to begin with. I don't think they should have just had 2 punts at the first round draft picks in that spot. So anyway, enough about Jagger Smith. Hopefully he's all good and he gets back soon. But I'll move on to Nick Haynes as well. I think bringing him in I think it's okay. My worry, especially if this was prime Nick Haynes, by the way, at GWS, I would be a lot more interested in this move. But my worry is that Carlton have just got another sort of undersized key defender here. This has sort of been their problem. They haven't had a great partner to pair with Wiedering, and Nick Haynes was all Australian quality backman for a few years at GWS, sort of been on the fringe of the team the last couple of years, and I'm just a bit wary of whether this is the guy that the Blues needed to add to their backline. I know that key backmen don't grow on trees, but remains to be seen whether this one's going to help them a heap or not. And then the other guys that they brought in, the Camporelli twins, showed one of them. I can't remember which one showed a bit in the practice match yesterday against GWS, but other than that, I think that they're probably not going to have a huge role to play this year. I wouldn't have thought, but that remains to be seen as well. And as for the outs for Carlton, we have Dominic Akew. Jack Carroll, David Cunningham. I know Jack Carroll, I think they actually just picked back up in the... Was it Matt Carroll? One of them they picked back up in the rookie draft. Anyway, David Cunningham, they dropped Sam Durden as well. Matt Kennedy, of course, traded to the Bulldogs. Caleb Marchbank was delisted. Jack Martin was delisted. Alex Murkov as well. And then Matt Owies, of course, traded to West Coast after that weird sort of standoff between his camp and the Blues for whatever the reason was around the contracts. But, looking at the ins and outs, you just look at them, and there's a lot of outs from guys who are at times were in the best 22 last year. Cunningham and Marchbank in particular, I've never been a huge fan of, but to still lose them as depth pieces and replacing them effectively with 18-year-old kids is not ideal, I don't think, unless you're very confident in the guys that you have in the pipeline already, which could be the case that they just want to take those clubs out of the bag and see what they have in house already. I get that, but that's before. I'm just talking about Cunningham and Marchbank, and that's before you even get to the fact that they lost Matt Kennedy for nothing, who was their ultimate utility for whenever they needed to fill a hole, whether that be forward, ruck, or in the midfield, which is obviously his natural position. But yeah, I spoke just a second ago about taking the club out of Vossi's bag, but it could have been that as well with Matt Kennedy, whether the list managers didn't love the way that Vossi relied on him to, put him into like weird positions, I guess. Not that he was bad in those positions necessarily, but I think that maybe it is a case of maybe he's just, you're getting diminishing returns by having him in the ruck and having him in weird roles throughout the team, and it's probably better to just play someone who's actually suited to that role potentially. But I thought he played pretty well last year. He played in a lot of games, and he's absolutely a guy that probably would be in their best 22 on a regular basis. And again, they just brought in 18-year-old kids, and one of them's out for the whole year. And now you don't have Matt Kennedy either to fill a hole if one of your injured stars goes down, which is already happening for the Blues. So, and lo and behold, one of them is their ruckman, Pito, who's got injured the other day. So, he could have played second ruck with De Koning, but he's going to be at the Doggies this year. And I already saw him in the practice match against the Hawks. He was playing ruck for them as backup. So, they obviously saw something with him, and they're going to utilise him in the same way the Blues did last year. So, an interesting one for the Blues to get rid of for me. And then also to part with Matt Owies was just another odd one. He was just, by all measures, the best small forward last year. And, for a team that doesn't really have a heap of quality at that position, I know Jesse Motlop has shown a bit of promise, and I'll get to him a bit later as well. But, you have two of the best key forwards in the league, and, you sort of want to complement that a bit with some other talent up forward. And Matt Owies was a great sort of third fiddle or fourth fiddle up there. I think that he was, I don't think he really put a foot wrong. From when I watched Carlton games, he always generally converted pretty well, and maybe it was the pressure side of things potentially, but I just think that as far as a goal kicking small forward goes, he's one of the better ones in the comp. Well, maybe not the better ones, but he's definitely in a lot of teams' best 22s to fill that role. And it's even more important when you have those two big key forwards. You have someone who's the quality crummer for them. Just to not prioritise him over Motlop, Fantasia, and Durden was just a bit wild to me. I think that Motlop I get because of the upside, but I would still rather one Owies than both of Fantasia and Durden if that's what it came down to. So just a bit of a puzzling decision on the on some of the player movement front for Carlton for me. But I'll get stuck into some of the expectations I have for them going into the year, and I'm not going to overreact to one practice game where they looked pretty solid against the Giants, I will say, and I will try to do the same with all the teams, barring any significant injuries. I won't stray too far from my priors, I guess, in that way. But if you got Goulden or Bontempelli going down for long stretches, it seems like as they are, as has been reported, then I might have to shift things a little bit for those teams. But in general, I'm going to try and after this week of practice matches, sort of stick to my guns and stick to what I think going into the season based on the moves and composition of the teams and their lists and how they went last year. So anyway, let's get into the expectations for and it's probably not the most glowing preview that I'll have for a team. And I've been pretty high on the Blues for the last few years, but I just feel like the window could be closing a bit quicker than maybe the Blues fans would probably prefer, and quicker than I think that their camp, that the whole club sort of thinks as well. The list itself is carried by their top end guys in Cripps, Curnow, Mackay, Sard, Wiedering, who are all 27 plus, and I'll throw Blake Acres in there too. He's been quite good the last few years as well, and he's at 29 now. So you've got all these guys who, like, 27 plus is not that old. I will say that, but when you're that reliant on those guys, it is a factor for me, and that's followed by some of the other key contributors in Sam Walsh and Chera, who are 24 and 25 respectively, but both often injured. So those guys are definitely not past their primes. But like I said, a lot of those guys, and arguably Cripps is probably the most durable one of the group, and they've all sort of dealt with injury issues, and the fact that they're in the sweet spot in terms of their age and in terms of the list age and stuff, that they've only really proven it to us as a core for one season, which was in 2023, of course, where they looked like a legitimate contender that year, sort of out of nowhere. They just dominated the back half of the year that year and made us think, that they just lost in the prelim that year, didn't they? I think so. It's not a. I just think that the core is approaching 30. They've only shown it to us 1 year. They're all often injured. And I feel like a lot has to go right for this group to actually be a legitimate contender. And I think that the Blues' sort of general ethos, like the list managers and the club, they've clearly gone all in on the belief in their stars, which is fine because, of course, stars do win premierships. But how much do we really love this group's cohort of star players, if you will, that much more than other teams? Especially when the other teams, I think, I feel like they have a bit deeper lists in general than the Blues do. So, that being said, I think there's still a chance, obviously, that this works. When you've got that many talented guys, if everything clicks for a year, then of course they can win the premiership. If they all stay healthy and play their absolute best, I think there is still that chance. But you can make that case for a lot of teams. The league is just that talented at the moment. So I think that the thing for the Blues is if we see, we sort of know, those established stars, what they're going to provide on a week in, week out basis if they are healthy. That is the absolute asterisk with the Blues, I think. But I think where we could see improvement from some of the guys outside of that core is what could be the swing factor for the Blues this year. And I'll classify this group as the swing guys because if as I was sort of alluding to, if some of this group is able to improve and become more consistent and influencing the game, then it'll go a long way to making them a more complete team and a lot deeper team with the quality as well. So, which is what you need when you're trying to win a premiership. I think you need a quality or just consistent contributors in roles. So, these are the guys that I'm talking about here: are De Koning, your McGoverns, Elijah Hollands, who had some really nice moments last year, I thought, and keen to see what he can do this year. Lockie Cowan as well, and Brody Kemp. Those are the sort of guys that have shown flashes at times for the Blues, and they get a bit of attention because they're such a big club. But turning those flashes into more consistent performances just sort of takes the load off those top end guys. And I don't think that they all are all going to hit and take a leap and become consistent players week in, week out. If any. Hopefully some of them will, but if any actually getting there, I don't know whether it will happen or not. But obviously De Koning is the main one in that group who a lot of people are might even consider in that elite group that I was discussing before. I think everyone can see the potential in how he has the ability to influence matches at times, but I also don't think that he has actually delivered to the level that the media in general makes it out to be. Of course, I'm not writing him off. This could be the year that he puts it all together and he can be that push the team and expand that core group of elite players to include himself. But I think that he has to prove it for a full season, and he's yet to do so at this stage. And I think that he's a key part of what the Blues need to go right for them this year. He obviously has had some injury concerns too, But yeah, it's not just that. It's like the consistent performances for him that I want to see this year. And if he does that, then and we get the same great years from the rest of the guys, then they'll be competitive again, no doubt. But yeah, how confident I am in that happening is yet to be seen. Far out, can't speak today. Anyway. Kemp is the other one. Brody Kemp as well could play a key role for the Blues. I'm sort of unsure where he's going to settle in, whether they're going to play him forward or back, like when they went over to West Coast last year with their backs against the wall, needed a win. He played forward, played very well. They sort of flirted with him up there. And yeah, I think they might have found a bit of a swingman in their team in the back half of last year. So, that position can be pretty valuable, or that player type can be pretty valuable. It gives you a lever to pull at some point during a game if you need an extra person back or an extra person up forward to take. If someone goes down, it is somewhat of an advantage. But I think that again, it's about consistency for him, and that is a hard thing to do when you're switching roles all the time and haven't necessarily established yourself at either end of the ground to begin with. So I think that, I'm interested to see A, where he plays, and B, whether that translates to good form for Brody Kemp, because I've been a pretty big fan of his as well over the time that he's shown some stuff over the last couple of years. So I think that excited to see how Brody Kemp's year pans out. And he had some interest from the Saints in the offseason as well, so the Blues were very keen to keep him, and within reason, because of what I just spoke about, the versatility that he's sort of showed in the back half of the year could really play a key role for the Blues, I think. But overall with the Blues, the concerns for me are essentially the group's ability to stay healthy, and I think it's a pretty valid concern. For a team as reliant on their top end talent, it really needs everything to go right, and it's sort of already falling apart a little bit for them. Nick Newman, who had the best year of his career, one of the best players for the Blues in general last year, is of course out for the year. Curnow and Walsh have had interrupted starts to the year. Doesn't sound like they're going to be out too long, but not ideal when they miss a bit of pre-season and are starting behind the 8 ball again, especially in the case of Walsh. I think Curnow will play into form, but Walsh is just another lost pre-season for him, unfortunately. Jagger Smith, as I spoke about, out for 12 months. Mark Pittenay out to start the year as well, and and then we saw McGovern on the weekend as well do something to his ankle. So hopefully he's all right, and it just feels like it's all piling up on the wrong side of the ledger for the Baggers already. But some of these injuries and moves have meant that the Blues have some interesting roles to fill, and the ability to move the magnets around and see what they can find early in the year. They're going to get a win in the first week, I'd imagine, against the Tigers. So, maybe they can flirt a little bit with some different lineups and figure out what works and what might not work for them. So I'll chat about some of those guys now. I think Ashton Moir is one to watch for me as well, with his role particularly. He's a bit of an upside play here for the Blues, especially now that Jagger Smith has gone down. I think that he has the potential to be a bit of an X factor. He showed at times late last year when he got the opportunity that he could be a contributor in that half forward role, and I think he might be part of the reason that they did end up delisting Jack Martin, who of course is just another guy who's just always injured, and at least they don't have to worry about that necessarily in that role this year. But I think that Ashton Moir is an exciting player to keep an eye on for the Blues, and he could really pop in this forward line and play as I said, that Jack Martin role a little bit. And Ashton Moir, for those who aren't aware, he was in his bottom age under 18s year, I think he was the top rated player. So he absolutely has talent. Had a pretty down top age year in his draft year, and that's why the Blues got him in the 30s, I think it was in the end, late 30s of the draft. But he's definitely got some talent and worth taking a flyer on. And he made his way into the team last year. Excited to see where this year sort of goes for him, and the role that he could fill, with some of these injuries and the off-season moves. So he's one to watch for me, I think, with his role specifically. Ollie Hollands as well. It sounds like they're going to play him off half back, and for if you're looking for a comparison, it might look a little bit like a Kane Farrell role, or even a Cade Simpson role from back in the day, where they're definitely a bit slightly built to play in the back line, which may not bode well when you're actually trying to defend. The thing, like, I get the idea with Ollie Hollands, like he's a decent kick of the ball, but I think that the thing that the Port backline specifically, if I'm making that comparison to Kane Farrell, is that the Port backline have some genuine bigs to hide him, to hide Kane Farrell a little bit, and you can put him on like the least damaging sort of player and one of those just purely pressure forwards. So I think Carlton don't necessarily have that luxury. Beyond Wiedering, they're not really that big. And that, there might be times where Ollie Hollands gets caught like in transition on the wrong player on a key forward, and he just like cannot compete, or not even against a key forward. Like I'd be interested to see how he defends some of the stronger small forwards in the league. Like I'd be a little bit wary of that if I was Carlton. And the other thing is that Ollie Hollands is also not the ball user that Kane Farrell is either. Like, he's fine. Like I think he's a pretty solid decision maker. I just think that he just doesn't have that level of kicking ability that Kane Farrell does from the back line. So that's one of the moves that I've seen them potentially making in the offseason in terms of where they're going to play someone that I'm just a little bit unsure about. And I think that he's probably just going to be relegated back to his role in the wing in general. And I spoke a tiny bit about it just then. The backline in general is a little bit sus for the Blues. I'm a little bit worried in that regard. Saad is an absolute gun, but he's not necessarily like the best one-on-one defender. He's that might be a little bit harsh. He's good, but I think the fact that there's now no Nick Newman to help be the guy that will organise them down there, in addition to Wiedering, means that Saad, of course, is going to absolutely have to defend. Try and balance his run off halfback with the ability to defend, and the fact that he has to create a bit more now that Newman's out for the year might stretch them a little bit back there. And that's before I even get into the actual sort of defensive side of it, where it's still just Wiedering down there. I don't really trust Lewis Young if they're going to play him down there with Wiedering, unless they really hit on Nick Haynes and he isn't as done as I think he is. But if Haynes is able to provide some aerial support, then maybe Lewis Young can just engage the key forwards, and Nick Haynes can come over the top and make some plays in that regard. But I think that that's why Carlton need to use the two rucks as well, is that you need to be able to like really push them back and help out your key defenders when the ball's coming in high, and you can get some spoils over the line for some more stoppages, which Carlton are really dominant at. So I think that being able to use Pito and De Koning interchangeably in the ruck is going to be huge for the Blues this year. I think that that's the best sort of that's going to help their backline the most, I think. I sort of go back and forward because you then aren't using De Koning in the way that you want to exploit the other ruckman by using his like running capacity over the ground for 4 quarters. So I'm a little bit torn in that regard, but I think that they do need to play 2 rucks where they can, just because of that, like the lack of size down back. I think that just gives them a bit more flexibility if they do play the 2 rucks. And that being said, a lot of the defensive playmaking and stopping will be on the shoulders of Jacob Wiedering, as per usual, who is, at times I've said that him and Harris Andrews are probably the 2 guys in the competition I trust most to be, those one-man backlines. But I think that even more than last year, he's going to have on his shoulders. So I think he, if he can provide another All-Australian sort of caliber year, then of course that'll go a long way. But I'm a little bit concerned about the Blues backline this year for the most part. I think Lockie Cowan and Jordan Boyd as well. I'm a big fan of Jordan Boyd, and I'll touch on him in a second. But those guys are going to have to play like elite stopper roles to help out Wiedering this year. And interested to see how they go down back. I think everyone knows up forward they should be able to score well enough, assuming the 2 big key forwards are up and firing. But and then their midfield is going to be pretty solid again. Obviously you got probably the best midfielder, if not top 3 midfielder in the comp, in Paddy Cripps. So they should be fine around the ball. But down the back line is where I'm a little bit concerned for the Blues this year. But yeah, I'll get into some of the players to watch for the Blues, and I have a few for these guys. And I'll start with Jesse Motlop. I think from what I've seen in the preseason, he's looking very good. He looks very clean and seems a bit more decisive. I think he's been a bit hesitant at times around in the forward 50, and he just seems a bit more... a bit more ready physically as well this year, I think. I just don't trust the other small forwards they have on the list, so they really need him to hit in a big way this year, I think. So, yeah, he's one of the Blues that I think could have a bit of a breakout year. Was sort of, hampered by injury last year. Wasn't great when he played. And, obviously always being out sort of creates a bit of a void for him to be like the number one small forward for them. And, he was taken high in the draft, so... for a reason, so I'm hoping that he can prove to us why that was the case this year finally. Nick Haynes as well is the other one that I'm watching for the Blues. I've sort of spoken a bit about him. I don't know which version of Nick Haynes we're going to get. I think his best is probably behind him, but if he's able to be, I don't know what's realistic. I don't think he gets to 90% of what he was, but if he can get around to that mark, then he really could provide some value as like an interceptor and make some defensive plays for them and help Wiedering out a bit down there. I spoke a bit about Ashton Moy already. Could be the version of Jack Martin that they've always needed. A little bit of a different player, probably plays on the ground a bit more than Jack Martin, who's capable in the air. But yeah, keen to see what Ashton Moy can do. Sam Walsh as well. I just wanted to touch on him, like I spoke about him off the top with the review of their season last year. But yeah, just a reminder that I think that he needs to put together a really good season this year for them to have any sort of a chance at contending. And then the last guy I want to talk about today is Jordan Boyd. So I spoke about him a lot last year, and I think him missing a lot of games in the back half of the year, including their final against Brisbane, really did hurt them. I think that, and I'm not trying to say that it was all because of him that it fell apart, because that you can't put that put that on a guy who's essentially a back pocket player, but the trickle down effect didn't help when they lost him. In terms of when he goes down, then Sard and Newman have to defend, which meant it takes away from what Carlton want to do on their rebound, in their transition and rebound game. So I think that having him back to start the year is going to be huge, and I think he's quietly one of their most important players. And considering that Nick Newman is out for the year, I think that he's even going to be even more important this year than he was last year to be able to actually lock down those defensive roles. And I just want to remind everyone that he lost 10% of his one-on-ones last year as a defender, and often took the opposition's best small forward as well. So that is a great strike rate for a small defender, and I think that he's going to have to go close to that again this year, which I don't know if he'll be able to repeat that necessarily, but opposition small forwards generally don't like playing against this guy. So he's going to be very important for the Blues this year. And I guess with where I'm at with the Blues is overall I've been pretty high on them the last couple of years. And this year, I think I'm going to be a lot lower on them than I have been. I sort of acknowledge that there is and I've sort of outlined the blueprint of how I think it does work with a few of those mid-tier guys really hitting and being a bit more consistent for the Blues. And I acknowledge that there is that possibility that it works, and works to a point where they are contending for a premiership. But as I discussed, it's completely dependent on the health of their stars and some of their peripheral stars, the Cherotypes and stuff like that, to really stay on the paddock and put some consistent footy together as a group. And I just don't believe that they're going to be healthy enough to compensate for the lack of depth that I sort of perceive they have. I've sort of spoke, they've lost a few depth pieces and guys that played serious roles for them last year and replaced them with 18-year-olds and Nick Haynes. So and the 18-year-old that they wanted to replace it, some of those guys with, is out for the year as well. So, I didn't love the direction that they took the team in the offseason, given that they were so reliant on the top end guys. They didn't really add any depth to it, and I guess they get Silvani back, so that's someone that they didn't have last year. But he's coming off an ACL, he's always been just a bit of a battler as well, so I don't necessarily think he's shifting the needle for the Blues. And yeah, as I said, a lot is hinging on their players that haven't necessarily proven themselves yet, and a lot is hinging on their stars to stay healthy, and they haven't been the healthiest stars over the journey either. So, yeah, it's not the best place to be when you're relying on unproven guys and or health to get you where you want to go. So, with that in mind, I've got the Blues ranked 10th in my power rankings for the year, which might be a little low and might look silly if everything clicks for them, but I'm pretty comfortable with where I've put them, unfortunately, for Blues fans, and I think they're going to end up about 9th on the ladder and just miss out on the finals. So, yeah, let's see how it goes for them, and yeah, keen to watch the Baggers this year and see how they go with a bit more of a challenge in front of them and a little a bit less hype than the last couple of years anyway. So yeah, I think I'll leave it there for the Blues today. As I said, I'll start going through some of the teams that are playing in round 0 next week. So stay tuned for those episodes, and Blues fans, I hope I'm wrong. All right, catch you guys.